It's time for the 32081 Scoreboard Show. Let's recap the latest weekly scores and highlights from around the county.
And that's right, it's time for another 32081 Scoreboard Show. I'm the Todd, and as always, like I introduce him, the man, the myth, the legend, the hardest working sports reporter in St. Johns County, North Florida, Mr. Anthony Richards. Anthony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Todd. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, no problem. I know we're dropping a little bit later than usual, everyone. I know, but we've had some conflicts. We've been running all over the place. So a little bit later than usual, but we're still going to give you the best coverage right here that you can get in the St. Augustine, North Florida, St. Johns County, 32081 area. So with that, one thing I want to share with you first, Anthony, is that you and I have talked about how the podcast has kind of grown and how it's been kind of interesting for us, especially this year. People are stopping us and talking to us and filling us in. You know what I'm talking about? It's been pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
So Devon Whitley, his dad actually reached out to me, and this is pretty cool. And I asked him if I could share it, and he said, sure. So, you know, I looked at his name and I thought it was Devon. I've always thought that. And he reached out to me and said, it's actually pronounced Devon. Now check this out. So it turns out that his grandfather, Devon's grandfather, Sergeant Howard Wentley, served in World War II. And Devon is actually named after a city in England where the troops trained before D-Day. And I thought that was pretty cool. So,
that is cool.
Yeah, just something we're learning every day, right?
Nice.
All right, let's, like I said, I said it last week, Anthony, I'm not jinxing anything. We're going to stay with the same flow because both teams are doing good with how we do this. So we're going to start with Ponte Vedra and go to Nice. I'm sorry. I've told everybody I played baseball for 18 years. I'm superstitious. We're staying the same. Okay. So first of all, let's talk about the Ponte Vedra game. They go down, they travel down and play IMG. A lot of people will say to you, this isn't their national team. This is their varsity team. And I kind of broke it down last week. You know, we talked about the fact of who they played and stuff, but it's still IMG. And this is the one thing I do want to say about this. That's a trek. That is a bus ride for a high school football team to go to anywhere and play as effectively as they did. And I think this was a big win for Ponte Vedra going into the playoff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was kind of like a dress rehearsal, a test to see how, kind of simulate, those longer trips, especially when if you win some playoff games, string some wins together, you're going to start playing out of your region most likely. And, you got to be ready for that road trip. It's road trips like that aren't very common. So like to experience it is a whole other thing for high school kids. So the fact that Ponte Vedra was able to go the 4 hours down to Bradenton and then just handle business and come back with a win. Not only does it make the trip much more enjoyable coming back after a win, but it proves to them that they've done it now. So now if they run into a road trip like that in the playoffs, it's it's old hat. We've done this before and we've come back with a win. So we know, we're confident that we can handle it, and we kind of have an idea of how our bodies feel during and after it and all, and just it's a great experience. And they proved that it didn't faze them at all.
It's kind of like, Anthony, you said there. It's like if anyone's been on a 4-hour car drive, you kind of feel like you got to get out and stretch, get ready. You're kind of like, I've been in the car for a while. And I got to tell you that, I was hoping to get Riker or Robbie on the show, and I tried to reach out to him. We're kind of playing tag, and hopefully I'll have someone from Ponte Vedra on next week. But that defensive line that we have talked about all year, they were at some point I was like, wait a minute. If they weren't wearing white jerseys, I would think they were on the offense because they were in the backfield that much during the game. I mean, they just dominated that line of scrimmage when IMG had the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they were coming from all different angles too. And I know like Reese Beck probably had the game of his season. He had 3 sacks to lead the way. I think he had a couple of tackles for a loss. He recovered a fumble. So he just, his night was just stuffing the stat sheet. But I mean, they had like 6 sacks on the night, just, multiple guys. And like I said, coming from every direction, every angle, up the middle, off the side. And it didn't really matter. And they're coming at you in kind of waves, it seems like. And it's scary facing them. I wouldn't want to be a quarterback standing back there in the pocket. That's for sure.
And again, the secondary stepped up again, now, albeit, like I said, the front line was given that pressure, the quarterback constantly making a scramble, but they did a really good job hanging with their wide receivers, putting the pressure on and making the pass defenses. The 2 touchdowns were late in the game after the game was out of hand. I think Ponte Vedra already had it. But again, the secondary stepping up, and I really like the way Ponte Vedra is getting better and better, especially in the secondary as they head into the playoffs, where it looks like they're going to match up against Beachside and probably a very good wide receiver in Maddox Hunstead.
Yeah, they're going to go against some good receiving cores, in the playoffs. Some of the better teams they can air it out, nowadays. So it's going to be a challenge. But I like how like we talked about the defensive line and how they've provided pressure. Well, that kind of coincides with helping your secondary, and I think the pressure they've allowed all year has really helped the young secondary kind of develop to come into their own. And now it's to the point where they can almost, kind of hold their own. So even on a night maybe when they're not getting as much pressure or the quarterback's getting the ball out quick to avoid the pressure, the secondary is there to come up, make tackles, have pass defenses. And it really, the secondary development with the relentless pressure up front that's a great combo to have, especially this time of year when with the playoffs right around the corner and you want to be playing your best ball.
Now let's talk about some of the young wide receivers like, Jack Burquest. He had a good night. I think he had a touchdown. David Doherty is kind of proven to be a little bit of that deep threat, even though I know there's some balls he wish he probably had back, that were overshot, but they still have to respect that long, deep pass. Brian is constantly, you and I love him. He's a workhorse, right? He really is. He's just, bashes through the line. But it seems like as these younger receivers, and Drew had mentioned about building the chemistry with them when we talked to him last week, it seems like these receivers are now posing more of a threat that the secondary for the other defense has to pay attention to them and is opening up some longer running lanes for Drew and Brian, because even Drew broke free on a couple long runs, and it was nice to see him get out of bounds instead of taking the hit. But it looks like now with this receiving core also coming along, the Ponte Vedra is able to do a little bit more balancing and not have to rely on Brian and Drew's legs as much and open up those running lanes.
Yeah, it really is a good balance, and the fact that they've been able to hit so many deep shots, throughout the year is also big. You're not just completing passes, kind of and keeping guys still up close in the box. You're throwing it over their head, which means that the safeties can't necessarily cheat up and come in and try to just focus on Brian and Drew and running the ball and short passes. So if they're that threat of the deep ball, which has been so prevalent for the Sharks this year, is a big thing, because now you can't really step up as much, because then you're afraid to get beat. And Drew's shown the ability to off play action take a deep shot, and his receivers usually come down with it. So
do you think we saw that breakout in the Fleming Island game with the receivers?
Yeah, I do feel like that was kind of the turning point where the offense kind of looked different and started to open up a little more. It wasn't just so much kind of methodical as much as it is, we can take our shots and we can score on 3-play drives, with a 50-yard bomb, and then throw it past 10 yards to the end zone, to finish it off. So I feel like, that is kind of where it turned. Even though that game didn't go quite the way the Sharks wanted, it seemed like they did kind of open up and kind of find the offense that they currently are dealing with.
Alrighty, so they will be playing Creekside, who sealed up their district last week also. So we'll talk about that game in just a second. Let's just cross on over to the Tocoi game. Yes, we have to talk about this game. 41-0 at the half. I was actually talking to someone else with the media that was at the game, and they were saying it just seemed that the wide receivers could do basically whatever they wanted to do. And this one got out of hand, and it got out of hand fast, Anthony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from the opening, the get-go with the kickoff return by Elijah Luckett, just kind of set the tone, and then the Panthers just kept their foot on the gas throughout, and made it look easy, especially in the passing game. It was really a clinic of efficiency in the passing game out there, and the receivers aren't just getting open, especially on deep balls, but once they showed off their hands and caught it, they were able to break a couple tackles and then continue it and run on to the end zone. So it was just kind of a great showing of deep balls and deep ball accuracy, and then what to do after the catch.
Well, you talk about Eli, and one of the things that I was talking to someone as that kickoff was happening, and we're like, something's different here, because the person standing next to me said, this is weird because usually there's 2 back. They must have seen something. And I said, well, Eli's due to run one back, and all of a sudden it just happens. He breaks it through. And then he had an interception also in the first half. So he had a fantastic game going into this. But one thing I do want to bring in right now is I was able to catch up with Fletcher Reston after the game. He had a touchdown pass where literally, if anyone saw this, he caught a slant over the middle, and the cornerback tried to make a play on him, and he just kind of said, nah, get on out of here, and he took it into the end zone. So here's what Fletcher had to say after the game when I asked him about the game. Fletcher, I just want to ask you real quick. It seemed like tonight you guys were just pushing around their secondary. On your long catch, it was kind of like you were just swatting away a mosquito. Did you guys see something you liked in planning for this game, or was it just a matter that you got the matchups you wanted?
We just got all the matchups we wanted, and we took advantage of all of them, and we won the matchups that we got and took the opportunities that were gave.
How did it feel when you saw the end zone after you made that catch?
Felt amazing. That's my first touchdown all year, and it's something I've been working very hard for.
So that was Fletcher Reston from the Nice wide receiving corps that just had a fantastic night over at Tocoi. And again, Nate has just so many weapons right now at wide receiver, and then he's also got KJ Perry that can also, catch the ball, and Andrew Moses, who's just a bulldozer behind there. This offense is really clicking, Anthony.
Yeah, it is, and especially if you get like Fletcher involved, because I know he's just continued to come on and develop and just be even more part of the offense and all, and he really showed that he has the ability to break a long one as well in the game. So it's great to see him. It's just another it just reminds you that the guys just keep coming. Again, like just like the PVD line, kind of the wide receiving corps for Nice is just waves of receivers and a ton of options for Nate to choose from, and it's pretty special and pretty dangerous, and the Panthers know exactly how to use them all.
And I also caught up with Nice's running back coach, Coach Babineau, and I asked him a couple things. I actually asked him first, what's it like having an offense that you can look at film and say, hey, you know what? We have to go with the run. Oh, you know what? We have to go with the pass, and be able to switch so quickly. And then I also asked him about the blocking that the running backs are giving to Nate Harry, and here's what he had to say. Coach, I want to ask you, it seems like, they talk about balance between a running game and a passing game, but it seems like you guys do it from game to game with your running backs. One time they could be rushing for close to 200 yards, and then tonight it's heavy passing. How lethal does that make this offense going into the stretch?
I mean, we can do whatever we want. If they give us the run, we will take the run all day. If they're going to let us pass, they'll let us pass. Last year for Tocoi, our running backs scored 7 touchdowns. This, besides the pick 6, the receivers and quarterbacks did all the work tonight, so it just shows how versatile we can be as an offense.
The last thing also is it seems like I talked to Easton about the offensive line blocking for the quarterback, but it seems like your running backs also are able to step in there. They're not getting to Nate a lot, and they're giving Nate some time to really make the passes.
Yeah, we really worked on that since last year. That was a little bit of an issue with the running backs, so we really focused on it this year. We hit the one-man sled every day, and the kids don't complain. They're pushing that thing till I say stop. Like, they're really selfless back there.
Anthony, I think the key thing there is one thing that you and I have talked about with this team is they're unselfish. They're very unselfish. They do what they have to do to get the win. And if they continue playing like this, what's going to be interesting is that it seems like we've seen kind of a one lopsided offense. And what I mean by that is it depends on the game. Like I said, it can either be heavy pass or it can be heavy run. And as they go into the playoffs, what's really dangerous about this is if they're so effective at any given game and any given game plan, it's going to be amazing when they actually have to combine both of them into an actual game, and it's going to make them very lethal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I don't know if you think we've even really seen the full capability of that. When they
I don't think so either.
When both the running game and the passing game, it's like just truly balanced. Both are just controlling things. I mean, and because they haven't had to do that. So I mean, but we've seen at times they can run the ball and KJ can take over, and then you have a game where Maddox takes over, and then you have a game where Tyler Gazenfari has some huge catches and kind of steps up, and so it's like you said, the guys are very unselfish, and they don't really. It's not just I want my stats every game. They know the stats will come. Maybe you have more of a quiet game, but then your next 3 games, you're stuffing the stat sheet. So like everyone gets theirs, and at the end of the day, the team always gets theirs, and they're always producing and always winning, and it doesn't matter how they have to do it. I really don't know how you defend, because we haven't seen anyone develop a game plan to defend this offense yet this year. So until we do, you got to just figure that they've got the upper hand when it comes to scheming.
Now, before we switch over to the defense and how effective they were, even though I think 41-0 at half kind of shows how effective they are, I do want to give a shout out to John Carriger. He actually had the play of the game, I think, it was News for Jacks, I think, if I remember correctly. He's been with the program 4 years. He actually had a beautiful touchdown pass. I think it was like 71 yards to Vernon Miller, and it was just a beautiful pass. And Vernon actually ended up with 2 touchdowns. So congratulations to you, John. I know you've been waiting for that, so super proud of you. Great job. Now, looking at the defense, we said Eli was on fire. He just was all over the place, interception, kickoff return, the whole 9 yards. This is one thing also that's interesting about this. So I noticed that they put Julio Santiago from Tocoi was the majority of the time on the young cornerback for Nice, Cash Colbo, and Eli was on the other side. Cash did a fantastic job. I think he's grown into this position. He's normally a wide receiver. He did have some pass defenses. He ended up with an interception. I thought he did really good against Julio, even though he did get a couple passes, but that's going to happen in a game. But the one time they did match him up that I saw with Eli, it was a pass defense down the middle that Eli just jumped on. So I think the cornerbacks are, especially with Cash stepping up, looking very good. Curry, this is the other thing I want to talk to you about, Anthony. You know, when Shamar went out with the knee injury, and hopefully he'll be back for the playoffs if they need him, and congratulations to him for his commitment to Army as well. Jacob Curry's speed is so effective that he's been able to run down cornerbacks on deep threats from his position, which I think have really helped out with Shamar being out temporarily until he comes back, because he had a pass defense that I know was in the last game that I was watching his speed, and he just caught up on the wide receiver. And I was like, dang, that was unbelievable. But with his speed, and then Noah Hodge just blasting through the middle, being in the backfield, sacking the whole 9 yards. Again, we talk about the Ponte Vedra defense, but this Nice defense, we've talked about them. They're lethal, and they're just chugging along, and whoever's got to do whatever they got to do, they're doing.
Yeah, and speed is definitely that's the word, because I mean they seem to have so much speed, you know, from Curry to Joe Miracle to, you know, running side to side, and, you know, Noah Hodge. I mean, it's just they seem to have speed everywhere, and that allows them to really chase down, you know, plays to the sideline and be the first in the hole and plays up the middle. So it's just they're always to the spot before the offensive guy. A lot of times, like they just do a great job of reading, and then once they read and decipher it, they're able to use their speed and get there. And yeah, Jacob's done a great job. And, you know, safeties are supposed to be kind of that last line of defense, but he's proven that he's not just the safety valve on, like, you know, deep, but he can come up and actually make plays that you don't see many safeties making. So it's really, really great to see everyone and, you know, developing and just coming together, and especially, you know, I know you mentioned, you know, Cash and how he's you know, come along and showing his hands as a former receiver, which is another thing that this secondary has really shown.
Yeah.
Is the ability to make plays once the ball is in the air. You know, a lot of times, you know, defensive backs are kind of forever, they've been kind of labeled as the former receivers, but they can't catch, so let's put them at defensive back. But not this group. This group, if you throw it in their area and you make a mistake, they're going to make you pay by catching it and bring it back the other way.
Well, I was joking with someone. I said, why don't we just put Eli on offense and see if he can get the hat trick, right? See if he can get a receiving touchdown. With that said, when we talk about speed on the defense, the one thing I want to ask you before we, you know, go into the predictions for next week's game, we talk about speed, and speed is something that you time and you look at and you say, okay, I'm running, you know, X in a 40 and I'm running this much miles per hour and stuff like that. The one thing that also amazed me when we talk about speed, like you look at Jacob Curry that is maybe following a wide receiver deep, and then you look at Noah Hodge and his speed and getting in the backfield. I think the other thing that goes with speed hand in hand, though, is that football smarts and their timing and their ability to time the ball. And that's one thing that has amazed me about this team, is that one of the reasons why they're ending up in the backfield to me is not just because of their speed, not just because of their quickness, but because it's like as the game goes on, and I know this sounds like kind of stupid because you're like, duh, Todd, but it's very rare to find a team that picks up on cues so quick that allows them to get in the backfield almost as quick as anybody. And I just feel that's a big advantage for this team, that they're able to pick up on something really quick. And we saw that with Joe Miracle 2 games ago. We saw it this past week against Toy with Noah Hodge, and also Joe and everybody else on the defensive line. But don't you think that also has a lot to do with it, that they're able to combine their football smarts, their football IQ with that speed?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it goes back to, you know, we talked about kind of their upbringing at the JV level and kind of coming up and kind of just developing those football smarts at, you know, early on at an early age. And then, you know, now you just continue to hone in on it at the varsity level. And they just know football. It's one thing to be fast, but if you if you don't decipher the play well, you could be fast, but you're just getting to the wrong spot quicker, you know? So you're not using your speed to its full advantage, but it's one thing if you know where the play is going, or you're able to decipher it and you know, win to the spot, and then you're using your speed to your advantage, and you can truly, you know, make a difference, and, you know, practically be in the offensive playbook, it seems like at times, because you're deciphering and getting to the play so quick.
All right, so switching to this week's games. First one up, we have Ponte Vedra is playing Creekside. Creekside's 5-4. They wrapped up their district, so they'll be going to the playoffs. As far as I look at this game, Anthony, I know that we've talked in the past that it seems like Creekside gets into shootouts all the time and stuff like that. I don't see that right now, especially after watching Ponte Vedra against IMG, see this defense coming up, this young secondary. I think the young secondary is actually coming up pretty at the right time to play against a quarterback like Sean Aschenfelder. And I think that Ponte Vedra is poised to win this game. I think they'll probably win it by about 2 touchdowns. I don't see this, though, being one of the typical 52-48 type of Creekside games we've seen. I do think that this defense is going to keep them in check, and I think that defensive line is going to put a lot of pressure on Sean this coming week.
Yeah, I see it pretty much the same way. I mean, we saw what the Nice defense was able to do earlier in the year against Creekside. Really, one of the few games that their offense really didn't produce what they typically average and what they typically are able to do. And I see the Sharks kind of doing a similar thing of, allowing, frustrating them and not allowing them to get into a rhythm offensively. And so, yeah, the points won't come as easily or, like they normally do for them. And that could lead to, frustration and then mistakes and turnovers and all that. And it just kind of, gets a little out of control at times, once all that kind of starts going against you. So I definitely see the Sharks kind of having their way and, being able to really just do their thing and get another nice win against the county opponent.
Now, the next game is a little bit more intriguing. We got Nice at Beachside. Beachside's 7-2. And this is interesting because there's actually quite a few kids I know on this team, but like, for example, the two that popped to mind is I know Marco Lanza and Maddox Hunstead, since they played with my son, and Pop Warner. And Maddox Hunstead's having a great season at wide receiver. I remember he had great hands back at 10 years old. I mean, he's a great wide receiver there. And Marco Lanza, as you and I know, he plays both sides of the ball. And then Eddie Jordan, who I've known probably for the last 3 years and seen him train as quarterback. Great kid, great speed. He's got a good arm too. I think this is going to be a good game. I don't think it's going to be another Tocoi game for sure. I do think the defense is, and this goes without saying, it's going to be the best defense that Beachside has faced. And I think that Nice is going to come out on top by at least 2 touchdowns, but I don't see this as a running clock game against Tocoi. I think this is a good matchup for Nice before going into the Bartram game and then rolling into playoffs, because everyone has to remember, unlike, for example, Ponte Vedra and Creekside, who are done after this week until playoffs, Nice still has to play that makeup district game against Bartram. So I like the time of this matchup. I think Nice wins, but I think it's going to be a good game for both teams to get warmed up and primed for the playoffs.
Yeah, Beachside, they'll definitely challenge you, especially offensively with their, kind of high-flying offense. But a bit, I was able to, earlier in the year when they played Ponte Vedra, I was able to get a nice close look at them. And, Ponte Vedra was able to get some pressure and kind of, limit them offensively. But it was still a close game, 17-14, Beachside, hung around and really, defensively, and then made it, kept it in the game, and it came down to the wire there. So, I mean, Beachside has definitely that capability. They're a really good team. But again, just kind of like the Ponte Vedra game, I think the Nice defense will definitely be up to the task and have an answer and slow down the Beachside attack. But being at Beachside and all, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how things go. And I'm really looking forward to this game because I do see Nice coming out on top, but I think Beachside will definitely hang around for a while and make it a really good game for sure.
What's going to be interesting is because it's funny because we talk about kids going to school together, and I said I know some of these kids from Pop Warner, but when you look at, like, for example, Nate Sievert, Derek Hardy on Nice, and you got Marco Lanza and Maddox Hunstead on Beachside. Oh yeah, and Jacob Curry is on Nice. They all played football together at Pop Warner over at Plantation Park and joined the Creek with the Outlaws. So I think it's going to be a fun matchup, and I probably missed some people in there. So it's going to be really cool to see these kids back on the field again after playing Pop Warner together. I think that's going to be fun. The other thing, Anthony, I want to ask you about this is, speaking of Maddox Hunstead and the threat he has with quarterback Eddie Jordan, one of the things that I think really steps out here is that we saw Tocoi try to do it with Cash, trying to go up against the young cornerback and not pairing them up against Eli. I think that Cash having the experience against Julio is going to help him with this, because I see them trying to get that matchup with Maddox. And then the other thing, too, is that with Jacob Curry's speed, if that is a deep threat that it's not lined up on Cash, I just think that Tocoi game set this up perfectly to have the coverage that is going to be needed to go after some of these lethal receivers on Beachside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's not going to be a surprise to Cash, and he's seen talented receivers across from him before, and now, and so it's not something. And he was up to the challenge last week, and he's been up to the challenge before. So I mean, yeah, it's definitely something that you feel confident. You continue to feel more and more confident in him, and I know the coaching staff does as well. To to allow them to kind of to trust that he can hold his own on his side of the field, and and make sure that they because Beachside, the one thing is they definitely love to throw the ball, and they actually I feel like they almost got away from the run against Ponte Vedra. So I'm kind of interested to see if they want to kind of be more balanced and look to run the ball more against Nice, knowing that what happened early in the year against a tough defense like in the Sharks, and now the Panthers face a similar tough test. So it's going to be interesting because if they just get back there and sling the ball around, I don't know if that's it's a recipe for success against this Nice defense if you're that one dimensional.
It's going to be a fun game to watch. Definitely going to be fun.
Sure.
So, what's your plan for this weekend?
I'm hoping to do half and half. I'm thinking I'm going to go to Beachside in Nice.
Sounds like you're making coffee, man. I'll have half and half. No, I'm kidding.
Hey, it's part of covering this football season, But so probably first half at Beachside, and then second half over at Ponte Vedra. It's their senior night, so it's going to be a fun night of games and a really festive atmosphere for those guys.
All right, man. Well, I'll see you over at Beachside then, as I'll be over there. And as always, please follow Anthony on X. He's got some great content out there. He's tweeting during the games. He's tweeting after the games with all the special content. You can follow him on X at ANTNYRich. That's ANTNYRich. And as always, shoot on over to PonteVedraRecorder.com and check out his local sports stories over there. He does a fantastic job, and I'm sure you'll enjoy reading them. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the show on your platform of choice. For Anthony Richards, I'm the Todd, and you've been listening to the 32081 Scoreboard Show.
Thank you for listening to the 32081. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
I love the show, guys. You're awesome.
Please don't forget to subscribe to the show so you can join us for the next episode.
I never miss an episode. It's the best.
Until next time, take care.